Today's guest is Katherine Robinette. She's the owner and president of Keystone and Raven LLC. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
That's good. I got to know you a bit when we did that live stream. Live streams are always fun. It's good because I forget that I'm on those live streams sometimes. Like, because I just go every one of these things like I'm just in another video video chat, video call. So, but they're fun.
Yeah, I like the energy of having multiple people on a call. It's all good.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed that public speaking is on your resume. I mean, is that something you started a long time ago?
Kinda. I have a theater background. I did musical theater for a number of years, a little more than a decade, and thought I was going to be a high school English teacher and do the theater drama stuff, in my as my extracurricular activity with the students. And a whole bunch of circumstances didn't make that happen. So I've never been shy about being up on a stage. I am an introvert, but I can suppress it when I'm playing a role and
Interesting.
go do the role. Yeah.
Interesting. Tell me about that. Is that suppression learned? Because I'm an introvert and I had to train it. I can't just suppress it. So talk me through that suppression process.
Um I always had a super active imagination, and once I was in a role, I was in it. I could just embody that role. And so I have whatever personality traits are needed for that role. And I can turn it on and off pretty easily. When I was super young, it was like hard to come out of character and go back to being me. Um, and to a certain degree, like I still talk in funny voices, and I love reading books aloud because I like doing all the voices and stuff. So for me, it's just a super easy transition to slip into a role and do what I need to do, and then slip back out and go back to being me. But for me as an introvert now, what that means is I just have to go back to my hotel room after I've done my thing and, like, not people for a while.
Yeah, I've maxed out on people today, so
Yeah,
recharge. Um,
done, done,
time out.
tapping out.
Now, here's a question for you. Being able to go into a role and sort of embody that role, I mean, I noticed you went to marketing. It must have been very useful in marketing.
Yeah, it's, uh, I didn't even know that. So I do marketing, or have done marketing for professional services, predominantly in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. And I didn't even know that existed. I was on in the nonprofit world doing advocacy work and fundraising and stuff for the nonprofit arts council that I worked for. And when I was ready to make the switch, there was an architect on our board, and he said, "Well, you've been doing marketing, they just don't call it that. So come talk to my marketer." And when she started describing all the things that I could have my fingers in as a marketer, I started salivating. I mean, this was like, I was an English major with a theater minor, so this was all of it. It was all of that. She said, "You could be writing press releases, you could be writing proposals, you could be writing articles, and then, you could be coaching them on doing an interview for a job, or coaching them for doing a presentation at a major conference, or doing the PowerPoint, or designing the graphics, or, I mean, it was just on and on and on."
Yeah.
Now, what I learned was you do all of those other things like this much of the time, like an inch of the time, and you write proposals and respond to proposals for the majority of the time. But I would carve my own theater niche in
Mm.
every company that I went into. So I come from
Wow.
a family of educators. If there was any training to be done, I was involved because I just craved sharing my knowledge, and I was fine being up in front of people and teaching stuff. So yeah, I did that everywhere I went. I had one engineer who said, "Now I finally understand why the engineering department is on one side of campus and the theater department is on the far other side of campus, because you are freaking weird."
No, you just just found a way. But I guess what I was alluding to earlier is that, a lot of times in marketing, you really have to get your head around, who you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And in the AC side of things, that could be multiple different people.
Yeah, you have a ton of different audiences that you're trying to communicate to, um, which is why I mean, there's so many rabbit holes we could go down. One of my favorite conversations was, "Why do we have a website? Who is your audience for your website?" And they're like, "Well, we want it to do this and we want it to do this." So, okay, we want it to be a recruiting tool, but we also want our clients to be able to find us and learn about us. And we want an engagement piece where we would like maybe run a blog or discussion group or something or whatever. Back when that was cool. And I'd be like, okay, so that's three different functions for one room. Like, would you do that in your living room? Would you have three different functions for the one living room? Have it be an office and your TV entertainment space and where visitors come? Like, no, not comfortably. So, what do you want your website to really do for you? And let's do that. Because I can write to one audience. I can't write,
Yeah.
to 10.
So what are the factors? I mean, a company, let's say an architectural firm, who should they be writing to? Ideally, I know people have their preferences, but you know, you know, there's lots of different people. How do you determine where to focus, or where should they be focusing with something so public?
Yeah, it depends on the medium. If you're talking about their website, I think I think most architecture firms that are doing it well have compartmentalized aspects of their website. So they have, the first 5 main headings are talking to their clients, the people who will ultimately pay them to do the work. And so they become these beautiful coffee table books that are electronic. And then they have a separate section that you can access if you go there looking for a job. And so from their job page, you can kind of
Yeah,
drill down and get into some employee background stuff
yeah,
and the fun things, the culture pieces. And that works because it's a very clear delineation. It's just that they treat their job page as a second, like, landing page for the website. They recognize it as the portal that it is to seeing what it's like to work at that company.
sure, sure. So basically, like onion peels, right? If people
Mhm,
are interested, they'll go down a layer, but the priority is X. And
mhm.
stuff. And what's second, third, or fourth could differ for companies, but whatever your most important thing, which is most likely your customers, come first.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And you can have the same conversation about Facebook or anything else. It's like, well, if the company has a Facebook, uh, Facebook page, maybe you ought to make that employee focused, like it doesn't necessarily have to appeal to the clients because your clients probably aren't on Facebook in their workplace. That would be
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah. Yeah, depending on the audience that you're after. So for
Yeah.
sure, I think yeah, that's a good point. Like with each aspect of your social, they don't have to, or they shouldn't have the same feel because the platform is a little different, and also, um, each tool can be utilized as a separate sort of entity to sort of attract or achieve a goal.
Yeah. And attract a different demographic. So, which
Yeah,
is what the platforms do anyway. So, so why not rate
absolutely.
to that demographic?
So when you were dealing with clients in the area, because I'm always curious, because when you have a agency or a firm, you just deal with lots of companies. So you get lots of reps, right? You deal with lots of different owners, lots of different focuses. What are the common challenges that came up that you were solving for people?
Well, I was working predominantly for civil engineering firms. So, there were the technical problems that we were solving for clients. That was like the immediate, obvious need. And that's the playground where the engineers lived. I know just enough civil engineering to be dangerous. Um, but I didn't try to pretend that I had the technical expertise. The problems that we were solving often were financially related, right? How do we get the biggest bang for their buck? How can we do more with their money? Because very often they would have grandiose ideas and pocket change budgets. Um, and often there were PR elements. So the firms that I worked for did a lot of the main highway and bridge work across the state. And so there was always a public involvement piece of, what is the impact going to be on the public during construction, or ultimately, is this going to make things safer, better? What's the benefit? And so there were often cost benefit discussions about, okay, we have to get the public on board with this being a really good idea. We are going to be building sound walls. Those are not a popular thing because people don't want the traffic noise, but they also don't want to look at an ugly cement wall. So what are we going to do to make it not be an ugly cement wall? What does the public want to see? Those kinds of things. And that always fell on the engineering firm to facilitate those conversations, usually with a public involvement sub-consultant or something. Um, I used to we used to talk about in our proposals, we see our job is to make sure that your phone doesn't ring.
I love
We don't want you, the client, to have to deal with the public calling you going, "This sucks." So, our job is to make it not suck.
Yeah, hear them and then try to make the appropriate plan or
Yeah,
whatnot. How much of
yeah.
what you did had impact? I mean, I always wonder about some of the things that go forward. Is that how much was it determined? How much of it was a back and forth feedback process? Uh, you know, in that process and where you were.
In terms of what marketing did, or
Yeah, marketing did. I mean,
yeah,
sometimes marketing leads the discussion with research and related needs, and how much of it is just taking what you have and rounding the edges and pushing it out there.
right? Oh, man, you would have been one of those engineers who said, "Well, just take last week's proposal and copy and paste it and, fix the name." I was like, "Oh, geez,
Oh,
no, it doesn't
no.
work that way." Um, yeah, it's a blend. Professional services marketing is relationship focused. So rarely, unless we were moving into a new market or providing a new service, we rarely led the the conversations. We could do some initial research about what might be possible with that client, especially if they were a new client. But if it was an existing client, which you would hope 80% of your work is repeat business, we relied on the engineers and the other technical staff. We relied on their relationships with those clients. Now, I say that one area where marketers really could influence was subconsultant data. So we would have relationships with marketers everywhere, right? Subconsultants, primes, blah, blah, blah. And the sub-consultants, of course, always wanted to be on our teams, and so they would visit with us about what was going on in the marketplace and, what they were overhearing, and they would tell us stuff about, "Hey, this client is not happy with you guys right now about blah, 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 blah." And I mean, that was gold. That was gold as far as we concerned because we could then do something about the relationship and of course, that would guarantee them a position on our next big project because they had been so forthcoming with valuable, relationship building information for us.
Good.
Um, but we could also talk to our competitors, marketer to marketer, right? So very often we would communicate, are you going after this? Because if you're going after this, we don't want to bother, right? Like we got other things to spend our money on, and that's another area where we could influence um, some of the conversation, some of what we as a company were involved with. But yeah, we let the engineers take the lead for the most part. I
Yeah,
did get to the place in my career where I could look at an RFP and go, "Oh yeah, this we're not going to win this."
yeah.
I could just
What
tell.
what were the sort of things like you don't have to be that specific, but what are the things you saw that led you to that? I mean, a lot of expertise helps, but like what are some glaring things?
Yeah. Anytime they would specify a certification requirement or an education requirement or, some sort of a degree or something we'd never heard of, that meant they had talked to somebody and somebody had said, "Well, you're really gonna need a nerve nerf navy derber." And so they said, "Great, we'll put it in the RFP."
Yeah,
And then we'd be like,
there's only one firm in the states that has that.
"Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, yeah." Or, we had just seen the announcement in the Daily Journal of Commerce that so and so got their certification in that. It's like, "Oh, yeah, that firm's gonna get this." Dope. So anything like that was strange. Sometimes the RFPs were very upfront about local knowledge, need to have local connections, need to know the stakeholders. And so depending on where it was in the state, we could say, yes, we did. And sometimes it was a little bit of a stretch. I was in Portland for most of my career. And so if it was Southern Oregon area, we'd be like, yeah, can we actually say that we know people down there and that we know what's going on? Maybe not, maybe we can't say that. So that would be an indicator. Sometimes funding or timing would be an indicator. Uh,
How
and
so? Funding or timing? How so?
sometimes the funding was you have to get to a certain point in the spending by a certain date. And we'd look at, okay, so the RFP is due X and it'll take 6 months to get under contract. Yeah, there's no way we can make this funding date. There's no way. Or sometimes there was all of the construction has to be done during the summer months before school starts. And we'd look at the scope of work going, you can't do that much construction in the summer months in Oregon. So, what are we gonna do? What can we what's the value add there that we can we delay school start or can we do phasing school start or could we get everything done so that they can bring the buses into the front part of the school and while we're still working in the back part of the school, like, they get very creative when it comes to the scheduling stuff.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, some of this stuff is not quote unquote non-negotiable, but I mean,
Right.
how talkative, or how communicative are people when you go? Can you go back on some of this stuff? Like, is some of it, are those
I
processes fairly
always
rigid?
Yeah. Um So legally, any proposal that you put in front of a public agency is a legal document. It becomes part of your contract with that agency. So I would always counsel them to not don't put anything in there that you can't back up, right? If you can't deliver that, then don't
Yeah,
say that you can.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. What I meant was like go back to the people writing the RFP and say, hey, look, have you
oh,
considered this?
yeah, so and that's where the relationship with the original owner or client becomes essential is because if we're talking to them enough in advance of when they might release the RFP, we can be talking to them about phasing options and timing and all kinds of creative ideas. That's when you really want to be doing it is you want to drop these creative ideas when they can co-create with you. And that would be another indicator in an RFP if someone had had the opportunity to go do that, because you might see something in an RFP and go, "Oh, they're asking for something really creative here. I'll bet somebody already dropped an idea in their head." Right? And it wasn't us because we weren't talking to them. So like we don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I know how to answer that by the letter. I don't know how to answer that innovatively. And occasionally they would ask for innovation and then and not really mean it. That's not what they meant. They don't wanna do something
But
risky.
wait,
Heavens
yeah,
no.
risky, yeah, risky or different, too
Yeah,
different.
yeah, heavens no. Yeah. But yes, so you can influence it if you can get in early enough and have the conversation with them about how it might all work. Because what we learned over time was project managers are hit with project after project after project, and 90% of the time, they don't know which one they're gonna get when. right? Because they don't know when the funding's going to shake loose and who's going to be available. And if you just happen to be on vacation the week that that project is ready to be talked about internally, you're not going to get it. It's going to go to some other project manager. And all of that being true, that means that when they sort of open their doors to start talking to consultants about the projects, they probably have thought about it for a day. So they don't know what they don't know, right? They haven't really looked at the studies that have happened before. They may not know the site. They may be all over it, but most of the time, no, they hadn't ever really noodled on it until that moment. And so our biggest value during those conversations, in addition to finding out what we needed to know to provide them a responsive proposal, was to help them noodle it out. Like, we just pick our brains and let's talk through
Yeah.
some stuff. Or, hey, we walked out on the site and we noticed X, Y, and Z. Are you worried about that? And they'd be like, X, Y, and Z, I didn't even know that was there, or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, it's in this report. That's why we went and like verified if it was there or not.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, what's the most interesting or creative way you were able to get a relationship that turned into a trusted relationship?
Hmm. Well, like most relationships, when you go through adversity, that's always that's unfortunately always a bonding moment. Yeah, I'm just sitting here kind of mentally going through all of the. There was one. We had an emergency response contract for a client, and they had an emergency, and we responded. Like it sounds trite, but it was true. It's like they were like, "We don't even know if this fits in the scope," and I'm like, "We don't care. Well, let's fix your problem. Like we can fix that, so let's do it, and we'll
E-
figure out
ex-
the rest of it later."
yeah, yeah. Explain to us, for those that don't know, what is an emergency response contract and what does it typically do?
Yeah, so this one, so emergency response contracts are usually an on-call as needed kind of thing. So there's no guarantee of work, and there's usually a cap of some certain dollar amount over a number of years. And so, if something happens that would require your area of expertise, so civil engineering in this case, they could just pick up the phone. They already have a contracting vehicle in place, so they could just pick up the phone and say, "This is task order number two." And go to work, right? Go figure it out. Tell us what the scope's going to be and how much it's going to cost. Or we're going to give you X amount of dollars. Go figure out what you can figure out. And then we'll decide if there needs to be a phase two for a different amount of money. And if it becomes a project that we need to bid out or whatever. Yeah. So that means when the phone rings and it's that client, the person who is the contract contact at the engineering firm takes the call and says yes. Like, it doesn't, like, very rarely do they take the call and go, think that that's our scope of work. They almost never do that. They usually say, yes, we'll go figure it out. Because when you propose for those, you say, we're pretty sure we're going to need these areas of specialty on our team for all of the variety of things that this contract is supposed to cover. So you already know who's on your phone tree, uh, depending on what the problem is that comes up. And so they just make the calls and a team goes out as fast as they possibly can. And that's usually one of the requirements of the contract is, quick response.
Sure. And I guess as a firm, there's only so many of these you want to sign up.
Yeah, right, for sure. Yes. Yeah, you want to spread them around your disciplines so that you don't overburden any one discipline. And you want to be fairly strategic about it because you have to think about, okay, we're going to be doing this for 5 years or whatever, with the option to extend another two. It's like, do you want 7 years of this kind of work on your resume? Is this something that you want to be known for? Or was this is what the work that was available and you probably never want to touch it again? Like, you really need to think about, because they're not interested in the firm with the latter concept. They want the firm with the former concept, which is, can we keep hiring you over and over and over for doing this kind of work? when this contract is over, are you going to apply again? We would love that because now you already know us and you know what kinds of problems we have, and the learning curve goes way down and the response time goes way down as a result. I was going to say way up. That's backwards. Responsiveness goes way up, and but the
Right.
timing goes way down.
No, very cool. So from the marketing world to what are you what you're doing now, why'd you make the shift?
Why did I make the shift? So now I work in the company culture, employee engagement, change management world, which sounds like completely different, but it's not. I figured out while I was still doing in-house marketing that all of the tools that we were using for wooing clients and vetting clients and building relationships with clients and being responsive are all the same things that you should be doing internally for employee engagement. And I had the opportunity where I was working at the time to do both. I was doing some employee engagement analysis. We were asking questions and something funky was going on. Nobody could quite put their finger on it. And so one of the leaders of the firm started talking to folks and he had all of this amazing data, but he didn't he didn't know how to analyze it and what to do with it, right? Because even if he had come to some conclusions based on that information, it was the then what moment, right? And I had been studying the employee experience since 2007. And so I had all kinds of ideas of things that we could be doing, but no outlet and no permission per se. So I'm like, let me take a stab at analyzing that data. It's one of my superpowers. I'm kind of weird in the marketing world in that I have a very analytical, data-driven mind. And yet I'm very communicative and fine arts focused in the output. And so I looked at all the data and I'm like, oh, here are the patterns. These are the like four things that keep coming up. And based on my research, here are like the two things that you could do that are actually pretty low impact in terms of cost and effort on the company, but would make a huge impact for these individuals and for the employee base. And they were like, "Huh, that's really cool." And then they did it and it worked. And I was like, "Okay, all right, clearly this is where I need to be focusing my attention because this is awesome." Like I have always felt that work needs to feel like less work. We are no longer in the industrial revolution, in the industrial age, and so why are we slogging through the day? And I can fix that. Pretty sure. Pretty sure I
Yeah.
can fix that.
What what are the keys to taking the slog out of work?
It is it's company culture is built it's a Venn diagram, right? The three circles. Uh Part of it is what is espoused. This is what we say about ourselves. Part of it is the actual systems and processes that are in place. So what do we do? How do we manifest what we espouse? And the other is how much shift do we allow, right? It's the floating bubble. So I tell people, like, yeah, leaders may set the culture, they may espouse the culture, but I can guarantee you that every employee and every manager is doing or not doing something to reinforce it or to subvert it. So if you want to make work not a slog, then those you need alignment on all of that. Everybody has to agree with what's being espoused. Yes, we believe that that's the direction we want to go, and this is the kind of environment we want to have, and this is how we want to treat our people. And these are the systems that we're going to use to do that. And those have to be in alignment. They have to be in attunement because if they're not, then you get an integrity gap. It's like when they say, "Oh, we trust all of our employees," but then there are metal detectors at all the doors. It's like, "Well, no, you don't trust all your employees then, do you?" And employees are smart. They figure out right away. It's like you are not doing what you say. I have now divested myself of my interest in this purpose because you're not doing as you say. Walk the talk. And then as the world changes, employees will start doing a groundswell of changes that they want. So you'll get the especially if they're like multiple offices in an organization, you'll hear like that one office does, you know, Beer Tuesdays or Taco Tuesdays. One office does Taco Tuesdays. How come we don't do Taco Tuesdays? It's like, well, you have the flexibility to do it. They just took the initiative. So we're not going to mandate it and we're not going to force that as a company value. But if you want to be doing stuff with your colleagues as a company, we'll pay for it.
Yeah. So you're saying here are the company values, here are on the other hand, here's what's happening, right? And how different are there and how much wiggle room are you allowing in between that?
Correct.
Which
Correct.
makes sense because there's no perfect alignment. I mean, I've always thought, when we read some of these books, it makes it sound like you need perfect alignment. And then you read more pragmatic books where they say, hey, if you're over X percentage, you're doing pretty well, right? So I get, I had to learn the hard way that you don't need to be perfect, but there is a threshold in which, people are something above satisfied, right? Whatever that is, that's good, and you're never going to get to perfect. But if you have a small core group of people that are sold, it kind of holds it together.
Yes, 100%. And so the work that I do where they bring me in, they're like, we want to change the culture. I'm like, great, let's find the group that has the culture that you want and let's study them for a little bit and
Yeah,
figure out
and,
what they're
and the
doing and why it
interesting thing,
works.
and I want your feedback on this. Like with change, I always find that like I think some organization calls it like the SWAT team. The SWAT team, the early adopters, are different for different things. Like certain items are like certain are attractive for certain types of people, and then certain initiatives. So I find that like you can't just have like one change management team. You need the change management team for this initiative that hopefully is a good idea, and you need to be open-minded to the fact that your idea might suck.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much there that you just said that is so true. And I'm having little joy bubbles. Yes. So, all of those skills assessments and personality assessments and work assessments and stuff that I'm a junkie. I love doing the assessments. That information can help you figure out who should be on which change management team,
Okay,
right?
which ones do you use to
Oh my
figure that?
gosh. Um,
Which tell me the few that like top 3. I know there's a bunch.
yeah. Um, so I like DISC and
Okay.
I like Working Genius.
Okay.
Both of them are so DISC has the four quadrants. It's fairly easy to digest what each of those four quadrants are and the dominant traits in each. Working Genius is about doing work. It's the 6 phases of work and where your natural tendencies are. So you'll have core competency. I'm really, really good at this. And you'll have core frustrations. And I do not like doing these. I can do them, but bleh. And then you'll have, yeah, I don't care one way or the other. I can do them. I'm competent, but I don't care. They don't fill me up with joy. With those two pieces of information, what your natural tendencies are, how you work with people, blah blah blah, that's DISC, and what your natural inclinations are in the phases of work, I can tell you who needs to be on what team. I can do it almost entirely with the Working Genius stuff though,
Wow.
because even if say idea generation, the wonder and ideation parts, the beginning part of a project, even if that's not your core competency, I can, as a facilitator, get you mentally there and keep you there long enough to start figuring out some ideas, coming up with ideas. Discernment is a completely different layer of the work process, which is where you start poking holes and stuff and figuring out if the idea is garbage. But first, you need ideas to poke holes into.
Yeah.
So, and I find for marketers, like, because their position is not always a leadership-based position, they are accustomed to following the ideas of other people. It is really hard for them to come up with ideas. Okay, well, then I'll help you get to where you're coming up with ideas, and then they can discern and implement all day long. They can figure out this is garbage and this is how we're gonna do it and, that whatever, all day
Well,
long. They don't need my help.
it's I think it's hard because that zone is where you fail a lot. Like, you just find a lot of things that don't work. So not everyone likes that because you throw up ideas and they just get pop, 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 pop. And if you can throw up a bunch and you're okay with it, like ending up with one or two good ones, but that's hard for people to take.
It is and it's not. Um, there is clarity and completion in having fewer things to do than having a great big long to-do list of big ideas, BHAGs, I call them, big, hairy, audacious goals. Um, 1 or 2 of those a year, and your team will be pretty well set because they also have to do their day jobs, right?
Yeah,
They also have production that they have to
for
do.
sure.
And I think that's true with any group, any department, any company that's trying to get somewhere, right? They have 5-year goals. It's like, well, A, don't wait until the 5th year to start. And B, it's okay to have some of these be done after year 1. Like,
Yeah,
if you had to work on all of them over the 5 years, you can't keep momentum, you can't stay excited about it. Nobody can maintain excitement for 5 years over a project, they can't. So just assume you're gonna get some of these done in year 1 and year 2, and then you're gonna pick up the next group of
yeah,
things and do them in year 3, 4, and 5.
yeah. Huh, interesting. That my marketing is gonna kill me because I could talk for hours on this. But is there anything that, that I haven't asked you that, you wanted to say? I know we can talk
Mm.
more on these because I have more questions and we'll talk more. But is there anything specific that, that's commonly that you find yourself telling people or that you want to leave with?
Yeah. So 2 thoughts. One is anybody can make change. You don't have to have the leadership title. You just have to have a framework and have a target that goal. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, it just went right out of my head. um,
Anyone can make change. I like that. Just
anyone
need the
can make
courage, right?
you need to have clarity about what you're trying to accomplish.
Hmm.
If you can articulate what you're trying to accomplish, you can get other people to help you make it happen.
Yeah,
If you can't articulate it in the words that resonate with people, then they can't help you. They can't make it
yeah.
happen.
And you gotta find
Um,
someone that can articulate it. Bring
right,
them
right.
in.
Oh, and the second thing is don't try to do it alone, right?
Ah,
Get a co-champion. Get somebody else who is as excited about the goal as you are, so
yeah,
that when you're having a busy schedule, they can pick up the slack. Or when they're having an off day, you can pick up the slack because you need both a cheerleader and an accountability buddy. So get a co-champion on every goal.